Today we're doing a full in-depth review on this guy. It's the Sony 18-135 F3.5-5.6. We're breaking down everything that you need to know about this so you can decide if it's going to be right for you. Let's get going. So you heard right, today we're ripping this thing apart in detail. It's the Sony 18-135. It's a crop sensor lens for Sony E mount cameras. And as usual, we're going to be breaking down the things that matter so you can decide if you should be considering this lens. If you haven't seen one of my videos before, my name's Stefan Malloch. I do a lot of photography and filmmaking news reviews and tutorials, so if you do enjoy this content, if you like this video and it helps you out, consider hitting that like and subscribe button. As always, here's some stats to start you off right before we dive into build. Okay, so let's quickly unbox this thing and have a look at the build. You're not going to find much in this box, just the lens itself, a lens hood, and some paperwork. That's pretty much everything right there. Now this lens is a fantastic size and weight. It's very compact and its performance is surprising. It measures only 4 7/8 inches long with the lens hood installed, and at full extension it's only 5 3/4 inches long. Take off the lens hood and throw it in your bag, and it's just under 3.5 inches long. Now it is a mainly plastic build, and it doesn't feel overly well made, but it also doesn't feel cheap. It's right in the middle. It's also nice and light at 325 grams, or about 3/4 of a pound. The only buttons or switches you'll find is one manual automatic focus switch. Both the focus and zoom rings are a cheap yet grippy feeling plastic, and both turn firmly and confidently. It's also got a very nice short zoom throw, letting you go from one end of the focal range to the other very easily and quickly. Like a lot of Sony's APS-C lenses, it's also image stabilized, which is a fantastic feature to have. You'll find 55mm filter threads on the front, and it also has a minimum focus distance of about 1.5 feet. On the back you'll find a nice metal mount, but unfortunately, no rubber gasket, leaving little confidence in weather sealing. Overall for build, it has a great compact design, but the materials leave something to be desired, and also a lack of weather sealing leaves me to give this thing 3 stars. Okay, so let's talk value. This lens has an MSRP of $679 US, which is, to be honest, a little bit ridiculous in this day and age considering what's out there. Its biggest competitor, no doubt, in the APS-C market is the 18-105 f4. And if you've got these two on a short list, check out my in-depth comparison video on these two lenses. We've got more and more competition coming out all the time, and the reality is it just doesn't make sense to pay full price for this lens anymore. If you can find it on sale or even used under 500 bucks, it might be worth picking up. But at full price for me, there's definitely not a heck of a lot of value there, and I give it 3 stars. Okay, so let's talk performance now. But first, who's going to actually use this lens? Well, you're not going to find it used by a professional, mainly because of the variable aperture, but for a beginner or an intermediate, it's a fantastic, versatile, decent performing lens. Let's see how it does in terms of autofocus. So the autofocus itself isn't the fastest, but it's fast enough, and it's almost completely silent. In good light, you're going to be impressed. In decent light, it's not going to let you down. And in poor light, it actually does okay. Now when it comes to stills, it's going to perform just as good, if not better. And one of the things that I really love about this lens is just its overall versatility and its focal range. 18mm, which is a crop sensor equivalent of 24mm, is wide enough to include most things. It's going to be great for landscapes or indoor shooting. On the other hand, the 135mm or close to 200 equivalent is going to let you really zoom in and capture some of that action. We will get into it in a bit more detail, but here's a few stills that I took, and overall, I'm pretty impressed with the image quality. And although it's not the longest zoom ever, you can get some pretty cool stuff, and the autofocus keeps up no problem. Okay, so let's have a quick look now at sharpness and optics of this lens. Here at 18mm wide open at f3.5, it's nice and sharp into the center, and in the corners, however, are struggling a little bit, but not a horrible performance. Stop down a little bit to f5 for a noticeable improvement, and this is going to continue all the way down to about f8 or f9, and your best being about, I would say, f9. And then around f16 or so, you're going to start to suffer from diffraction and lose some quality. Overall, at 18mm, a decent performance. Having a look now all the way zoomed in at 135, our maximum aperture is now f5.6. In the center, quite sharp, and into the corners, actually a decent performance now. Stopping down to f8 for a little bit of an improvement still, all the way down till about f11. And after f11, you're going to start to have some softness creep back in. Overall, a decent performance, especially considering this lens is, of course, very versatile with a huge focal range. A quick look at the distortion and vignetting. This is wide open at f3.5 at 18mm, and this is with the profile correction turned on. When you turn it off, however, it's absolutely horrid. We've got some incredible distortion as well as some vignetting going on. This will be present throughout the entire aperture range at 18mm, but let's have a look at 135 now. Zoomed all the way into 135 here now. As you can see here, it's definitely not as bad as 18mm, but there is some noticeable vignetting and a little bit of distortion as well. So overall, make sure you have your in-camera corrections as well as profile correction turned on if possible. Another great feature of this lens is image stabilization. This is going to let you handhold in lower light and lower shutter speeds and still get some decent footage. Here's a few examples of that. And let's have a quick look at the bokeh of this lens. At 18mm, that's the only time you're going to have access to f3.5, and it's by no means extraordinary. Its 7-bladed aperture does leave something to be desired. Having said that, when you zoom all the way into 135, you can get some decent compression, and it looks not too bad. I'll also mention the constant minimum focus distance of about 1.5 feet, and that's not too shabby for around a 200mm equivalent focal length lens, letting you capture some interesting and macro-like shots. Overall for performance, I was actually a little bit surprised by this little guy. It's got fantastic autofocus, it's relatively sharp, image stabilization, a versatile focal length, and a decent minimum focus distance. What's not to like? I give it 4 stars. So wrapping up, I have to admit that my first impressions of this lens weren't great. Just the overall build quality wasn't fantastic, but it did grow on me. It's a great little performing lens with the perfect size and weight for travel or for convenience when you're just bombing around town. As always, here's my personal pros and cons for this lens. Rating this lens as a whole, it's an all-around decent performer, and I do mean decent, probably on par with the 18-105 f4, just not as tailored for video. If I could give it 3 3/4 stars, I would, but I only deal in half stars, so I'll be generous in this case and give it 4. If you're a subscriber, you also know that I like to rate things on a scale from never think about again to consider to definitely buy. And in this case, if you're a new to intermediate photographer looking for a great all-around shooter that'll fit anywhere and won't break the bank, maybe consider this one. If you're still undecided, consider checking out my video on the Sony 18-105 f4 or my comparison video between these two lenses. And that's going to be it for this review of the Sony 18-135 f3.5-5.6. I hope this video helped you out. If it did, consider hitting that like and subscribe button. If you want to buy this lens, if you want to pick it up, I'll leave affiliate links down below in the description for you. And like always, make mistakes, be yourself, and get out there and take some more pictures. See you next time.